isn't integrating values going to hurt the return that we can expect on our assets? Get ready for that question because that will come up. We had to achieve that, but we didn't have to give up any of the values to achieve those returns. We had to match them as part of the process.
In this podcast series, we talk to leaders and experts in social investing to learn about how we can amplify our impact as practitioners in the social investment space. I'm your host, Siddharth Chatterjee. Our conversation today is with Mathew Jensen, Director of Faith-Consistent Investing Programs at FaithInvest. FaithInvest is an organization supporting faith-based asset owners to invest in line with their values. This conversation is a terrific learning opportunity for organizations looking to align their investments more deeply with their values. Let's get into it. Hi, Mathew. Fantastic to have you join us here today. To get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at FaithInvest?
Sure. Hi. Pleasure to be here. Really happy to be here. So FaithInvest is a global nonprofit based in the UK that works with faiths on faith-consistent investing. We're pan-faith. We are global. We're operating in most areas of the world with faith asset owners. I came to FaithInvest with a background in investing. I was a portfolio manager at various firms, a director of investment at various firms. I'm a certified financial analyst. And I really approached the problem from a pragmatic perspective of how do you take a faith's values, translate those into language that an investment manager or an investment committee or some investment practitioner can use to actually make decisions in a portfolio that reflect the values of the faith. So that importance of translation and pragmatics was the background that I came from. FaithInvest itself is made up of faith practitioners, faith scholars, and then folks like me who come to the challenge with an investment background. Oftentimes, when I hit this point, people say, well, what does faith-consistent investing even mean? And it really means taking the values of your faith, the deep values that have developed over hundreds or thousands of years that you live by and you preach on and you do good deeds with as a faith, and applying them to the assets of the faith and making sure that the assets that the faith has really reflect the values that are actually doing the good work of those values in the world through the investments that they're making. So very, very important activity for institutional faith organizations.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. Just to dig deeper a little bit on why. So we've been working with quite a few faith-aligned, faith-consistent organizations at AVPN recently as part of our Faith and Giving initiative. And these organizations are often actively driving impact through either their philanthropic giving or their initiatives within the community, whatever their main way of operating is. Through their investments, maybe not so much. How would you actually motivate to actively drive impact through your investments?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we've termed the two-pocket problem, where a faith organization or faith-based organization is frankly doing wonderful work in their activities, in their preaching, in their giving, but oftentimes they're not connecting that with the assets that they have to fund those activities in another pocket. Those two things are separate. And in fact, when we survey faith organizations on their integration of faith values into their assets or their investments, there's a large number. There's about 45% who actually don't do this. They actually live by the two-pocket method where they have good deeds and works and then their money just funds it. And the money doesn't reflect their values at all. And one of the things we talk to faith organizations about is your money is your energy in the world. You're putting that energy out there and it's doing work in the world for you and hopefully generating a return for you that you can use to fund the good activities. But that energy you're putting out with your money also should reflect your values because it's actually changing the world. It's doing things in the world. It's investing in things that are having impact, intentional or not. And we recommend taking really a holistic approach to the organization and look at where all your energy is going as an organization, and particularly making sure that the assets that organization is relying on to fund their activities those assets are also reflecting the good values and beliefs of that organization and the energy that they're putting into the world as well.
Right.
So it's really this holistic approach that oftentimes organizations just don't connect. And one of the things FaithInvest does is try and make that connection and then help them do the work.
Right. And I can see how that's really quite powerful, right? Because part of it is a matter of, I think, as you said, being that holistic perspective. And if you're an organization that's used to a particular method of operating, then you're not really thinking of your investments as much a part of your activities. You're thinking of it in an operational perspective, where it just keeps the organization running. But investments are having a huge impact. And whether it's negative or positive depends on how intentional you are. And I'm sure lots of our listeners would be agreeing with that. It makes a lot of sense to want to drive your values and your impact through your investments. But one of the challenges is really not knowing how to do it, especially if investing is not your operational expertise. How do you even get started?
Well, the first I say is get exposed and get educated. And there's organizations like FaithInvest. We put a lot of case studies out there. We put a lot of materials and guides out there. And there's other organizations that do similar work. AVPN does this type of work where you can just start to get educated about what are the practices, who's doing it in this space, what are the challenges of doing it. Even episodes, podcasts like this is just a great way to kind of just start get exposed to this space and start get educated a little bit. The second thing is there's usually somebody in the organization who's motivated around this topic. They see the connection, they see the potential of having their assets also do the work of their values while they're contributing to the good deeds and preachings of the organization. And it's that person who brings the energy and some of the attention and focus of the organization to doing the things that need to be done to align your money with your values. And then as part of that, there's a number of steps you can start to take to build the foundation within the organization to ensure that it's thorough, it flows throughout the assets that the organization manages, and it's enduring at the organization.
Yeah, no, that's really effective. And I think, as you said, education is a good way to get started. When we spoke about this earlier, you also spoke about the governance aspect of it. What do you mean by paying attention to the documentation and the governance around your investing?
Yeah, that's really the importance of the foundation of faith-consistent investing that you establish within your organization. So you've gotten educated, you have somebody who's inspired, you have the attention of the organization, and now it's time to start building that foundation for faith-consistent investing within your organization. And that foundation is made up of three things. One is documentation, the other one is governance, and the third one is communication. And oftentimes when we're working with organizations who are new to faith-consistent investing, they've got that energized sponsor, they've got their organization's attention, they want to get straight to investing. They want to start doing things with their money. But we say, take a step back, build the foundation first, because without the foundation, your effort could be ephemeral. There could be new leadership that comes in that doesn't know why you're doing this and changes the approach of the organization. The first thing you need to ensure you're doing is you're embedding this practice in your organization and you're making it enduring. As leadership changes, as generations change and take over the leadership of the organization, you'll have this foundation in place of faith-consistent investing. So documentation, what we're talking about there is primarily your investment policy statement. Somewhere within your organization, you probably have an investment policy statement that says, this is how the assets should be managed. This is the objective of these assets. These are the constraints, and these are the values, if any at all, that we want to be reflected in these assets. So the investment policy, get your hands on that. That's where we're going to integrate a lot of the faith values. The second area is governance. How are those assets overseen? You might have an investment committee. You might have a chief investment officer or a director of finance who reports to a board. What is the governance process for those assets? And let's make sure faith-consistent investing practices are embedded in that governance. And then finally, this is a step, frankly, that a lot of organizations miss, is let's talk about the good work you're doing. Communication. Who are important audiences for those assets? Probably the leadership of your organization, maybe some of the contributors, maybe the faithful, if you're a faith organization itself.
Right.
In some cases, it might be the public where you're operating. Who are those critical audiences for your organization, and what should they know about how you invest and the impact you're having on the world through your investments?
Yeah, and taking the eternal view, taking the long-term view, building that foundation, that's something that faith-consistent organizations know a lot about. And doing that with your investments means really getting quite, I would say, practical, and getting it into the governance, into the documentation is a way that you can see these values reflected year over year, and in a way that you can measure and improve upon. And this is really exciting stuff, and very heady as well. So it would be exciting to see if we could make this real in a way. The case study that you've already mentioned would be a really exciting thing to dig into a little bit. So could you tell us about one organization that you worked with where you helped them bring their faith values and align their investments with those values?
Sure. Yeah. This is frankly one of my favorite parts of the work we do, is actually working with an organization to do this good work, to build the foundation, and then to see it flow through to the investments and the good work that they do with those investments in the world. And one of the organizations that we worked with, this would have been about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It was a Buddhist organization in the UK called English Sangha Trust. And in fact, it was such a wonderful project. The English Sangha Trust had a pool of assets for operating expenses and capital improvements on their properties. And they had an investment policy for that pool that was essentially 2 or 3 sentences. It was maybe a paragraph long. And if you read it, you wouldn't know it was a Buddhist organization. You wouldn't know anything about their values or their beliefs. They're actually a Thai forest tradition Buddhist organization, and you wouldn't know that from reading their investment policy. And when you look through to their investments, you certainly would have known it in how they invested. So the energy came from within. There were individuals within this Buddhist organization were saying, here's our values, here's all our great work, but look what we're invested in our portfolio. So we took them through the journey, the examination, documentation of values, incorporating those into the investment policy in guidelines. And as part of that, we used a lot of examples. So we have an extensive database of investment policies and guidelines collected from faith organizations all over the world. So oftentimes they would ask us a question: how do other organizations word or approach in their investment policy care for the planet? How do they describe that? What do they do in their and we could show them examples of how other organizations have done that. They had very specific questions. How do we think about gold as an investment? It has some negative attributes to it. It has some very positive attributes to it. How do we think about that and incorporate that into our investment policy? So we did a lot of work with them on that, and then flowed it all the way through to their investment guidelines. So what are they actually telling their investment managers to do and not do in their portfolios relative to their values? And then ultimately to the managers that they selected who could implement those guidelines, who could most effectively reflect the values through the guidelines into the actual portfolios that they own. It was about a 15-month process from beginning to end for them. There was a lot of collaboration, a lot of sharing internally. They pulled in faith scholars. They pulled in some financial practitioners around their board to contribute to this effort. But ultimately, it led to such a solid foundation, long-term foundation. In fact, as part of this process, they decided to set up a long-term investment fund to cover healthcare expenses for some of their organization members. And it really embedded this sense of this is a long-term effort. It's foundational to the organization now. The organization is bought into it. The investment managers that they're working with them, understand them, know what they're looking for, know their values, and can implement those values in the portfolio. So for us, it was a really exciting project to see from beginning to end, to see the organization rally around it. And we had to write a case study about it.
That's amazing. And I'm excited to dig into that case study. I think one of the things that's most exciting about this for social investors in general is that you're uncovering a new way of having impact within your organization. So it is not merely about being a better investor, but it's really about finding new ways to have impact, which is what your work is all about, right, as a social investor. Of course, there will be obstacles. As somebody who's worked with a lot of organizations, I'm sure you're quite familiar with some of the obstacles. So maybe you could lay out the path for us. If we've got somebody who's listening to this, who's inspired and bought into this idea and wants to bring it to their organization, what kinds of challenges or obstacles could they expect to find when they try to enact this?
Yeah, great point. And you do need to go into this sort of aware of some of the challenges or obstacles that you may face. And we generally see three in most instances. One is this sort of, there's a bit of inertia around this sort of embedded and often unexamined belief that if you integrate your values into your investing, you need to give up some of the return on those investments. And get ready for that question, because that will come up. That will come up from your board, your advisors, may come up from someone in your financial staff. Isn't this integrating values going to hurt the return that we can expect on our assets? And I will say that belief is crumbling. And it's crumbling in part under the weight of evidence. The academic reports and such, we've written about a few of them that are out there. And be prepared for those. So get educated on, first of all, recognize that challenge is going to come up. Do some of the research. Look at some of the reports that are out there. Talk to some of your peers. Look at some of the case studies. How have they thought about this challenge of the impact on return of integrating your values? That was certainly a question that came up in the English Sangha Trust case. They had a return target for the operating pool of assets because they needed to fund every year the operations of the organization. Right. And so that was embedded in the investment policy. We had to achieve that, but we didn't have to give up any of the values to achieve those returns. We had to match them as part of the process.
Right.
The second challenge you'll get is resources. Do we have the right people? Do we have enough people? Do we have the right advisors? Do we have the right members of our investment committee to do this work of examining our values, documenting them, integrating them into the investment policy and guidelines, and finding the investment managers who can implement those? It is a bit of work, and you need to make sure you've got some resources lined up to help you do that. The third area, and it's kind of related to resources, is you may have some outside investment advisors or outside consultants or financially trained board members or investment committee members who may not have the capabilities to do this type of work. They may be organizations that have never done any type of values integration into investment. Talk to them, check with them. Talk to your board members or your investment committee members. Make sure you have somebody in those groups that are skilled, interested, or experienced in integrating values in investment. Do that homework before you get started.
Right. So there's the mindset. That's the challenge. And a lot of that is just perspective around realizing that it is possible to meet your investment goals and have them be values aligned. And then the second part is just about the resources. And it's something that you mentioned a couple of times today, which is somebody who has the energy and the passion to drive this forward. That does require work. It's not something that happens instantly. As you talked about your work with the trust as well, it was a 15-month long process, but it does really build the foundation for something long term. And the final one being, of course, partners, key partners who understand and are able to support you in this approach, whether that's external consultants, members of your board. I would just love to ask you where practitioners could go if they'd like to learn more. So you mentioned the case studies. Are there other things that you'd recommend?
Sure. The case studies are a great place to start. We have a course that we offer a few times a year. It's the Faithful Finance course, and it's aimed right at those individuals who are either beginning the journey or they're on the journey and they want to go further down the path. I'm one of the teachers in that course, and we bring a cohort together, pan faith around the world, to really talk about starting that journey and the practicalities of proceeding on that journey. And there's some exercises that you'll do will actually get you started on the work over the course of the course. We also have a faith consistent investing interest group. We get together every quarter. We're talking about things that are relevant to faith consistent investors. So our June meeting, we spent on this very question that you asked earlier: how do you get started and how do you embed it? And we had 2 faith organizations talk about their journey. How did they get started? How did they get embedded? And we meet every quarter and we talk about issues like that as faith consistent investors. And plus we put out a column every week on research topics that are relevant for faith consistent investing. So a lot of resources here at FaithInvest.
That's great. Really, really excited for us to dig into that. And I think one of the most powerful aspects of it is being able to learn from the peers. So, accessing that database, being able to understand how others have done it and leverage FaithInvest's experience, as well as the network of other faith organizations that you'd get connected to. This is also something we're very excited about this year at AVPN. So we've been running these faith and giving learning circles, which are small group discussions for peers to talk about these challenges. We were very, very delighted to have FaithInvest be a featured practitioner in a learning circle just 2 months ago. And it raised a lot of the questions that we're unpacking today. So that's something that you could look forward to and get in touch with us at AVPN about. Mathew, thank you. This has been such an incredible conversation. I've learned a lot. So I'll leave you with one final question, which is any final thoughts that you have or any guidance that you would share with our community of social investment practitioners.
I imagine many of you are sitting there, you've listened to Siddharth and I now, and we've talked about governance and documents and investment performance and your values doing well in your portfolio, and it can seem a little bit overwhelming. And the lesson I hear from every single faith asset owner who is on this path, when I say, what would you recommend to another organization who's looking at this path and wondering if they should take it or not? They say, just get started. Just get started doing this. Start reading a case study. Start looking at some of the research. Reach out to Siddharth. Reach out to me at FaithInvest. Just get started. It doesn't have to be perfect in the first month. It's a journey that you're on, and just take that first step. We're here to help.
Amazing. We couldn't have put it any better. Just get started. We're here to help. Thank you so much, Mathew. This has been a pleasure. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Siddharth. Pleasure to be here.